Okay, good morning everybody. First, I want to thank Chaim for inviting me to lecture in this event, and particularly since my lecture touches three of my favorite subjects. First is history, second is Jewish Orthodoxy or Haredi Judaism, and third, beautiful women. I know it's not politically correct to speak about that, but in our case, the fact that the woman I'll be speaking about was indeed considered to be exceptionally attractive has affected everything which had to do about her and about how society reacted to her. Saying that, I will not mention this fact again. I'll just let the images to speak about it. So I'll be speaking about a woman named Ruth Ben David. We'll start by looking briefly at her biography, and then we'll look at her letters, that's to say her ego documents. תן לי 10 דקות. Okay, so who was Ruth Bloy? She was born by the name Madeleine Lucette Ferrel to a non-practicing Catholic family in 1920, and a few years later the family moved to Paris. She led an ordinary life and was a good student, yet the marriage of her parents was failing and they eventually divorced. When she was only 19, she married a local soldier and had her first and only child, her son Claude. 3 years after they married, the couple divorced. In 1943, aged 23, she completed her bachelor degree in history and geography in the University of Toulouse. And during World War I, she joined the French resistance movement, and infiltrated the Gestapo as a double agent. There's a lot to say about that period, but I'll just settle with that. In the early 1950s, she studied philosophy as a PhD candidate at the Sorbonne in Paris. During that period, she also went through a spiritual voyage, which eventually led her to study about Judaism. During her studies, she established her own business, yet ended up in prison for several months due to tax evasion fraud. After studying Judaism with a local rabbi, in 1952, she decided to convert and to become a Jew. The name she chose after her conversion was Ruth Ben David. Ruth is a biblical name of known convert to Judaism. And Ben David is also related to that family. Her son, who also converted, was named Uriel. In 1953, she visited Israel for the first time. In 1960, following a failed love affair, she decided to immigrate to Israel with her son, and they settled, actually she settled, in Mea Shearim, Jerusalem's most religious neighborhood. The son was sent to a yeshiva in another city. Shortly thereafter, thanks to her reputation as an underground fighter, she was asked to participate in the kidnapping and smuggling of the boy Yosale Schuchmacher. Yossele's parents immigrated from the Soviet Union to Israel in 1957 and brought with them the son Yossele and the daughter Zina. Because of financial difficulties, they asked their Haredi parents who lived in Mea Shearim to raise Yossele. 2 years later, of course they visited Yossele every now and then, but 2 years later, when they settled, they came to take him home, but the grandfather, who was afraid that Yossele will not be raised in a Haredi manner, refused to return him. After the police began searching for the missing child, it was decided to smuggle him abroad. They asked Ruth to do that job for them, and she managed to fake her son's passport. Instead of Claude, she registered Yossele as a girl named Claudine and put a new picture in. She then dressed him as a girl and smuggled him abroad, first to Europe and then to the United States. The police couldn't find him, and Ben-Gurion asked the Mossad to intervene, and it took the Mossad a couple of months to trace, first of all, to trace the Rus, to interrogate her, and only after a couple of months they were able to find the missing Yossele in New York. In these years, she came to know the spiritual leader of the Eda Haredit, Rabbi Yoel Teitelbaum, the Satmar Rebbe, and his wife, Rebbetzin Alta Feger. The Eda Haredit is the name of the organization for the most radical Orthodox group in Israel. Those are the groups that usually demonstrate against Israel, against anything that has to do with Zionism. They don't recognize the state, etc. When she returned back to Israel after the affair was finished, her resourcefulness and audacity made her a known personality among the seekers of the Eda Haredit and Neturei Karta, which is the most radical group within the Eda Haredit, and she became a known figure in those seekers. Eventually, when she came to Israel, she received a few marriage proposals from the elderly leaders of this organization. In 1965, after a long public debate, she decided to marry Amram Bloy, the leader of Neturei Karta. He was a widower with 10 children, who was over 20 years her senior. This caused a big stir among Haredi seekers in particular, and in Israeli society in general. This was all over the newspapers at that time, and still is, by the way. After the marriage, the home became a hub for the activities of Neturei Karta, and while Amram led the men, Ruth became a leader among the Haredi women of Mea Shearim. While he organized various demonstrations and public protests, she was occupied in settling family disputes and matchmaking. After Amram's death in 1974, Ruth promoted many communal activities in Israel and abroad. Among other things, and thanks to a French passport, she was involved in rescue operation of Jews in Muslim countries, including in Iran, where she even met with Ayatollah Khomeini and was accused by Neturei Karta in cooperation with the Mossad, that she worked for the State of Israel while undercovering as a Haredi woman. In 1978, she published her autobiography, which was later translated to Arabic and Hebrew. She did so against the advice of the leader of the Eda Haredit, which consequently caused a local scandal regarding her. After a long and extremely interesting life, she died in the year 2000, age 80. She was survived by her only son Uriel and her grandchildren, none of whom remain in the circle of the radical Haredi groups. Now we go to the letters. Ruth wrote hundreds, perhaps thousands of letters. Several dozens of them were donated to the archives of Boston University, while many others are in the hands of family members and Judaica collectors, and everyone now and then find their way to public auctions. But the letters I'll be speaking about are the ones held in Boston University's archives. Most of the letters were written in Yiddish and were sent either to Amram, her husband, both before and after their marriage, but also to the Satmar Rebbe, his wife Rebbetzin Alta Fega, and to other rabbis and friends. Now I'm going to speak about the importance of Igor documents as revealing sides of a personality which without those documents we wouldn't have known. Because judging by the public figure of Ruth Bloy, we can ask ourselves, what should we expect from a woman who not only converted to Judaism, but also resolved to live among Neturei Karta, the most radical camp of the ultra-Orthodox community, and on top of that, to marry its leader. So, basically, we'd expect her to adopt Neturei Karta's lifestyle, set of values, religious ideology, and their theological objectives. But on top of all, we would expect a woman like that to assume the role of a good Jewish woman, meaning to totally obey not only the rabbis and the husband, but also men in general. Yet Ruth's letters depict a totally different picture. So I'm bringing you a few examples from Ruth's letters, which I've translated from Yiddish. And in those we'll see several examples of her behavior which we would not expect from a religious woman, from a Haredi woman, to act in that manner. We start by a letter condemning prominent members in the community. In Jerusalem, among all the good people, there is a nest of snakes, not less. Everyone is chasing money or honor. Their pride knows no bounds. And among them, there are also some worms who go with the snakes because of their inferior interest and for their livelihood and that of their children. Ignoring social norms and accusing others. She's speaking about the way of dress that Orthodox women should adopt. And she writes, I myself don't particularly observe the color of my handkerchief. Handkerchief in this sense means kerchief that you put on the head, or socks, but I have great respect for the old customs. In my opinion, short clothes with black socks is worse than with socks of another color, because they draw attention so much, and when the clothes are short and the socks are transparent, it is terrible. And this is how the promiscuous girls walk in the streets of Paris. And look who she is talking about. I know it's hard for you to look at what your granddaughters are wearing with all the details, but I don't see who else I can go to and talk about it. Now we see how she speaks about the Satmar Rebbe. This is the topmost spiritual leader of this community. The Rebbe wants me destroyed. I understand very well that the Rebbe would want to see me die with a cold body and cold heart. After all, who am I? A simple convert. The law for me is different. Because it is so important for the Rebbe to maintain peace with all the groups, I hope that God will punish only the wicked. And as for the Rebbe, I hope that he will not have to atone for all the sins of his Hasidim. Love expressions. When the trouble regarding our match, she writes to her future husband, when the troubles regarding our match started, I said I didn't want to hear about another match. Even before the wedding, I realized that he is the dearest thing to my heart. And I understand that I sinned before God by daring to hope for a second thing, that I would also have a child, which he didn't. I wish God would allow me to unite with a man with whom I want to be both in this world and the next, because he is more precious to me than my own life. Despair and distrust in a husband. This is also very surprising. My fiancé, namely Amram, allows people to continue to slander me. But I don't accept it. Enough, enough, enough. I may be a schmutzige kleine Gioret, a dirty little convert, I brought that phrase in Yiddish, but I'm also flesh and blood human being. I can't have it anymore. People, rabbis, Torah scholars who write such slanderous words are not righteous, but wicked. My fiancé believes the word, and he will stay with them. But it's not for me. I myself don't believe in it anymore, not even in my fiancé. He caused a lot of blasphemy. I remain alone with God. Manipulating a future husband. I asked for your word on two things, and you promised me. But regarding the first thing, I saw no change, or almost no change. It hurts my heart to see that I can't trust your word 100%. Despite all the mistakes, you remained as dear to me as before. But your position takes away my faith in salvation, because I don't think that God brought us together just so that we could make each other happy. He surely wants both of us to be his servants. I am sure he wants you, and me too, to commit good deeds before the wedding. To conclude, in 1925, Jewish poet Charles Chernyakhovsky wrote, "A man is nothing but a small piece of land. A man is nothing but a mold of his homeland's landscape. Only what his budding ears have absorbed. Only what his eyes saw before they had enough." A person may learn a new language or decide to immigrate to another country. A man may even adopt a new religion and dedicate his life to full realization of his belief. To that end, a person may choose to put his life in danger, as Ruth did, and even to risk the well-being of his dearest one, which Ruth did when she smuggled Yosele abroad, leaving her son here, because if she was caught and sent to jail, then there was no one to look after her son. A man may give up on his most precious desires, such as having a child, which happened when she decided to marry Amram, in order to share his life, her life, with a person she admires. However, Ruth's letter shows us that despite her determination to adopt an alternative, pure, untainted life, when things didn't go her way, she could only find assurance in her own, I put in quotes, goyish personality. As for everybody interested in the very interesting figure of Ruth Ben David, there's a book that just came out by my friend Moti Imbari, which is called Ruth Blau, A Life of Paradox and Purpose. I want to thank you very much for listening.
I have many, but I'll only ask two. How is it that the community allowed, not only that Haredi community, a strict Haredi community, not only allowed a convert, which is looked down upon, but also a divorcee? I mean, I think it's astonishing that the community allowed the marriage to take place, and was this a reflection of his being, Amram Blau being the head of that community, or was it a reflection of a somewhat earlier time in Haredi being closed-minded? And the other question is, why would Ben Gurion task the Mossad with helping a peace? I can understand if it was Agudat Yisrael or some part, or National Religious Party, or some part of Ben Gurion's coalition that he needed support from. But why would he help a Haredi party essentially kidnap a child back from the Galut to Israel?
So, as for the first question, there was an enormous objection to that marriage. On the one hand, there were people from. You have to realize this is a political. Basically, it's a political issue, because you have among the most radical wing, there are two organizations. This Eda Haredit, which is the top organization of several groups, and within the Eda Haredi there's a smaller group which is called Neturei Karta. And it's a question, who is more radical than who? And there was an internal political battle going on between the leaders of the Eda Haredit and Amram Loy, who was the leader of Neturei Karta. So the point was that some of the leaders of the Eda Haredit also wanted to marry Ruth Bloy. And the reason, I've already spoken, okay, there was a reason for that desire. But when she decided to marry Amram, then all hell broke loose, and there was a total objection to that, and it was really like a big war going on. They approached the Satmar Rebbe. Amram Bloy had 10 children. They approached his children, and there was a big thing. It took them like three years, to fulfill the marriage. I mean, from the time they've decided, and Amram actually obliged that he would marry her until the actual marriage took place. It was a big issue, and there's a lot of And in Moti's book, there's a whole description about that. That was also spread in on all the Israeli newspaper at the time. It was a big thing, like love affair at the heart of Mea Shearim. It was a big story. And even today, every now and then, the issue raises and attracts lots of attention. So that's for that. It didn't go unnoticed, this issue. And as for the second, there is an article that also Moti and I wrote together. Eventually, I took my name off that article, but we wrote it together about the reasons why Ben-Gurion involved the Mossad. The basic thing was that he did not want to allow the idea of a rebellion among the Haredi, because we had the Neturei Karta working in Israel for a long time, and they did all sorts of demonstration and protest, and the first, when Israel was established, they tried to approach the United Nations and to other parties in order to not enable the establishment of the State of Israel. And then at the beginning, it was also decided that Jerusalem will be under the United Nations control, or international control. Eventually, Israel declared it as a capital, but Neturei Karta kept insisting that they want their own autonomy there, so they went to the king of Jordan and asked them to be like Jordanian citizens, or even to move to the old city. So there was like a dissident movement, and when that step came up of the kidnapping of the boy, this was something that Ben-Gurion could not tolerate, going without a proper response, because this was like a outright rebellion against the state and everything it had to do with it. And because the police was unable to find the missing boy for a long time, eventually he put the job in the hands of the Mossad, who were at first reluctant to take it, because he said it's not our jurisdiction. But when he explained the reasoning behind that, they accepted the challenge, and actually it took them a long time to find him, because Ruth was quite clever in acting, and even when they captured Ruth, it took them a long time of interrogation until they were able to reveal where the child was in.
How come she wasn't in jail there for kidnapping? How come she wasn't charged with kidnapping?
Eventually, after the discovered the missing child, it was decided that for the general interest of the public, then almost everybody went unpunished. Because it was not just her, there was a couple of people here in Israel which at first hid them in several locations in Israel. And then she took him abroad. And when he was abroad, she also had him in other locations, first in Europe, and then she wanted to send him to Morocco, and then she went to the United States. So she was very active. I mean, she took the job very, very seriously. So there were a lot of people involved in the kidnapping, and some of them were tried. Yeah, but eventually it was decided not to punish them in order, to let the whole affair fade away. Yes, it's happening.
I in a previous trip to Madrid on Shabbat, I met one of the activists from Neturei Karta, who he isn't the foreign minister, but he's like an executive, and he explained that they want to remain small, and they have this mission that the Gentiles and also the Muslims are going to bring about the Messiah, and they have a system of 400 disciples, and only the men are the Neturei Karta, not the rest of the family. But I wanted to ask two questions. In the end, why did she decide to marry him? because despite all of her debates, okay, and also what caused the split between the Satmar and the Neturei Karta, to understand, you know, the politics and who's against who and the dynamics. It's more than just an extremist escapade. It does deal with some Jewish theology.
Well, first to a decision to marry Amram. Basically, think of that as a situation of a religious cult, and you have the opportunity to marry the head of that cult, the leader, the spiritual leader of that cult. This is unquestionably, you know, for a young woman or for a woman who doesn't have like anyone else, any position in the community, that's her only salvation. I mean, at least this is what she aspires to do in order to gain like recognition and to be able to fulfill herself. That's her utmost desire. So she was able to achieve that, despite the fact that, as I said, she never got to have another child, which she wanted to. But she gave it up in order to marry Amram and to take all the negative feedback which came along with the decision. As for your second question, we are speaking about three groups which I refer to as extreme Orthodox. Basically, they are looking down at mainstream Orthodoxy, and they're saying we are better. We are the true Jews. Yes? The other Jews are either flawed or false. We are the true Jews, and among them there is also a competition. Who is more Jews? Who is more true to the true word of God? So it's a competition between these three groups. Satmar, which is basically based in the United States, which have a different set of values, and you have the Eda Haredit, which is in basically in Jerusalem, and you have Neturei Karta, and each of them has slightly different religious philosophy and theology. And for example, the Eda Haredit, those groups who are living in Israel must justify the fact that, in spite of their objection to Zionism, they lived under a Zionist regime. So I have to explain that in a religious manner. So that's not easy to explain. And the Eda Haredit, which is a larger organization and has like thousands of members, they have to communicate and cooperate with the formal organization in order for them to survive. I mean, they must use like Israeli money, they use transportation system, they need assistance with the water supply, with sewage supply, with telephones, with everything, and they need cooperation with the Israeli authorities. Neturei Karta said, no, we don't care about all that. We don't want anything to do with the authorities. We just handle things ourselves, but which is okay for a very little group, but not for a group which has like thousands households. So there's differences between them. With Satmar, as I said, Satmar are living abroad, so they don't have to deal with the question of living in a Zionist state. So they have their own interests, and they have like neighborhoods in Israel. In order to build them, they also need the cooperation from the local authorities. So they are also being attacked by Neturei Karta. So it's a big mess there.
Just a comment, even in her name that she took, Ruth Bat David.
Ben David.
Ben David. But it seems to me that's already being fairly independent-minded. Wouldn't a convert ordinarily be Ruth Ben or Bat Abraham Bezerah?
Well, she studied a lot before she converted. Actually, she converted twice. The first time she was converted by a Reform rabbi. And she wasn't satisfied with that, and then she continued to study, and she decided to be converted by an Orthodox rabbi, a zealous Orthodox rabbi, and by that time she knew a lot about Judaism, so she made...
I'm suggesting that not only it shows independence, but a certain hauteur that she is aligning herself with Ruth, the great-grandmother of David HaMashiach.
Yeah. I mean, she doesn't speak about that, but obviously, when you read the letters, you see that there's I didn't bring it here because I thought it was too much, but you see there's a lot of underlying many of the texts are like Catholic ideology. I mean, the terms she's using, the references she's making, for the Bible, you see that she wasn't completely cut off from her old self. Yeah, so this is true.
Did you find any letters from her to other women in the community?
Yes. There are letters to other women friends. There are also letters to the Satmar Rebbetzins, and she's also quite manipulative in that. I mean, she's playing on the women solidarity thing, that you have to help me. We are women. We have to stand together.
But did she have support from some women in the community? Did she find
Not really. She was. I mean, She was. Basically, she was kept to herself because nobody. I mean, there was a lot of objection to her as a woman from the sake of the women. First, because of her appearance. Second, because she dressed differently than other women. And third, because other women envied her because of her.
She was a convert. She was an outsider.
No, not only women.
She was the first lady.
She was even beforehand because she was a prominent figure. I mean, she was not that type of subtle woman who went unnoticed. I mean, everybody noticed it. When she walked in the street, everybody noticed it because she dressed differently. Yeah, I mean, but she was a celebrity, and people and men admired her. Not only, and the women hated her. So she had very, very few female friends. So the basic function that they did was just tell her gossip of what other women were telling about her.
I have a question.
Okay.
The process she went through is not very usual. She decided on her own to become a Jew, whatever the reasons are. And then she came to Israel and went back, and only on the later part she decided to be, okay, we're going to join the Edah Haredit.
Yes.
And she went into it, and then the Yosef Shumacher affair happened, and she was involved, so it was a kind of a test. She went with the Haredi community. But then you thought that she had choices to marry Amram Bloy or marry others. And the question is not why did she decide to marry Amram Bloy, because you might find it in the letters, you might not find it in the letters. But why do major political, religious persons, why do they run after her? Why do they want to marry her? Maybe they want to be a boss, the way Boaz acted to Ruth, etc., etc. I don't know. But it is something that you have to think about. I'm not looking at her, I'm looking at them. Why do they want to marry her? And the second question is, okay, she decided to go with natural cult. And she was involved in smuggling Yosef Shumacher outside of Israel, etc., etc. But they found out she was the one that helped him go abroad.
Yes.
And if I was in the Haredi community, I would be very upset because she's taking the headlines to the community, and you don't want the headlines in the community. So it is puzzling me. Not from her point of view, but from their point of view. Why do they want her?
Well, I can't answer why, she got several propositions to marry the elders from the Eda Haredit, which, on their part, I couldn't imagine that, no. I don't know if it's true or not true, but it was an opportunity for them to marry someone from without the community, someone who was young, who was attractive, who was fertile, and certainly this was a consideration from Amram Bloy, because I didn't mention it, but one of the stories about Amram Bloy was that during the War of Independence, he was wounded in such a way that he became sterile and couldn't have children. So that was the story. That happened already after he had 10 children. But according to the letters, this was not true. Mm-hmm. So he might have been motivated to marry a young woman in order to have another child, in order to prove that the story is not true, that he's still a man to consider.
He writes about it as well. So,
yes, so this is another reason for you. So we don't really know the whole thing. It's all very ambiguous, but it's still an interesting story.
Thank you.